Ladies and gentlemen, young, middle-aged, and old doesn't exist, old, but some people are maybe aged. Welcome to a reading episode of the Podca Even God is Mindblown. I'm just jumping in right in there. You will find out what it connects to. So the pre-story here is I'm starting with chapter 4 of my book Evolution Imperfect. This is the story. It's a book, basically, just that's great to know. It's a book that kind of writes about all my books. And you will find out when I wrote the book and what this is about, but only just kind of like really a summary, the whole story of all my books, how I wrote all the books. And I was sick and laying in bed, and in bed I could do nothing but then at least writing while I was super weak and always falling asleep. And there's one thing I can't do apart from reading is also falling asleep. But there I was so sick and weak, and then I built this construction to be able to write with my laptop. I'm going to show you a photo or maybe a drawing if I don't find the photo. And that's how I was laying in bed and writing all these books. And also every now and then when I was finishing a book and I was writing an expose, or as I call exposol, and I was carrying it to a publisher house here in Cologne, Germany, a big publisher house at the Dumont house. Just giving you that information. And in this, where I'm starting to read, I wrote a book, brought it to the publisher, and now I was waiting, but in this time I was just writing another book. And that is now finished. Later Boo Part 2, my fourth book in under 9 months, was created. Almost. I stopped writing right before the last scene of the last chapter, the great finale. It was all there in my mind, matching to the title System End. And by the way, Later Boo, it's a comedy. I know not finishing the book, it now seemingly contradicts with bringing birth. But let me explain. So, I was writing a book, and usually you can't interrupt a pregnancy. When you bring birth, it's a long, painful process until finally there's the birth. And it was always my process until now. I just had this kind of like, I just felt that I needed to relive it all again to be better in the finale, to truly have all the details. So I that's why I interrupted it, and so I wanted to go through all of this again and feel it and live it and create the audiobook so that I can even better feel it by being the characters, by giving them, I'm a voice actor, and having all these characters with the voices and reading it, and in the end putting it all together to an audiobook. That was the plan, to completely feel the story and all of it in perfection, to be able to write the absolute ultimate finale, which would have been a court scene. And I wanted it to be genius, and so I wanted to have this perfect, the perfection. But I couldn't handle the hunger any longer. Suddenly I found myself in a supermarket. I didn't even remember how I got there, and for the first time in over 16 months I was about to buy things I wouldn't be able to metabolize. I was in the worst state of health, breathing heavily under my pullover hood, which kept my face in the shadow, and walked slowly, one foot by another, barely able to keep my body vertical. While people were staring at me, I was staring at nothing but tasty food, fighting not to touch, not to pick them up, to buy. All these things I didn't even remember how they would taste. And then I entered the worst possible area. Surrounded by nothing but candy, sugar and salt, I stopped in front of chocolate bars. Standing for minutes, fighting so hard against the force, now finally completely out of control, that I was crying. It got even worse. I was starting to lose it, made sounds, bit into my jacket, ready to scream, when I suddenly hit against the rack, causing it to shake, and bags of chips from the top fell down. Nobody saw it, but a woman, one of the staff member who must have heard it, entered the floor. It fell, I said, ashamed, when she came closer, and I wiped my tears away and started to pick them up. While she didn't say a word and started helping me, I added sorry, until I asked her, "Are these bags wet?" "Wet? What?" She wondered and touched the one I was holding, adding, "No, it's not wet." Now she looked at me, realizing I was in a bad shape. And I asked again, "Really not? But they're very cold, right?" "It feels normal, rather warm. Can't you feel that?" "No, I can't. For me, it feels wet and cold. Everything." "Thank you," I added and left fastly with 2 bags of chips. On my way, I grabbed cookies and other baked sticks. Then I grabbed an empty carton and filled it with wet and cold conserves, followed by microwave food, cheese, baked potatoes, as well as a few pizzas. Until it all fell to the ground because it was too heavy for me to carry. When I slipped, I suddenly screamed. For that moment, I can't be so bad on reading. From that moment on, I was not really seeing anybody around, just picked up what I could carry, chips and cookies, which I opened right there and ate, crying. Last thing I remember, I was asked to leave the store. Yeah. Of course, I paid for the open things, but I left most of the other foods behind. Instead, I bought a lot of natural food, potatoes, vegetables, and sweet fruits, but also a lot of cheese and fish and rice and chips. I desperately stuffed my backpack. Back home, I found myself trying to cook a huge bowl of cheese-baked potatoes, but I was barely able to cut the potatoes. It required too much energy. My arms oversoured without doing anything, and touching the knife hurt. But it couldn't stop me from eating cookies and chips more and more and more. I was stuffing until I had to vomit because my stomach wouldn't stop producing acid, which was a general problem when eating something other than my only food, corn waffles. Dry, plain, nothing. Now I couldn't stop eating the taste, the sugar and salt. It was like a drug. It took hours toward my dream of the cheese-baked meal. Now I was laying in bed, suffering from acid and vomiting, crawling, waiting for the oven to cool down after I turned off standing in fire. I could feel the temperature cooling down while laying over 3 meters away in my bed. I could feel what a thermal camera would capture, all of it. The auras, the red hot spot, the cold blue spots, while my body was a mix of both, feeling cold drops running through my hot veins, forced to feel my inner anatomy. When I felt I could get close to the oven again, I instantly ate the entire bowl, after which I threw up again, on purpose. From this point on, I was suffering from uncontrollable eating attacks. I was about to eat myself to death. When I became a writer under the most horrible circumstances. And hopefully this podcast episode is listened to by Physics Girl.